And we are live with a country agent, Angus McLaren from Miller and James. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Mark.
Yes, city versus country. Welcome to Morning Minutes. Myself, Michael Bergio, Mark Novak, and special guest, Angus McLaren. Angus, how are you?
Yeah, really well. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me on the show this morning.
Not a problem. Let's get into it, Mark. What's city versus country? Like, I think what are Angus, what are the biggest differences straight away that you do daily with type of property compared to us in the city?
Look, we've got a lot of similarities and there are a few differences. So, I mean, we sell a lot of farms in our business. So selling a farm is completely different to selling a residential property, for example. And, you know, our clientele have different expectations and the way we market our property is certainly different to the way you might market a property in the city. So we've got to be very conscious that our vendors have got, you know, probably a little bit more conservative when it comes to their personalities and the way they want their properties marketed. So it just means that we use a different sort of marketing campaign and different methods to get the property out into the marketplace.
So, Angus, just to qualify what you do and who you are, where you are and stuff like that. So you're in TAMORA. Where is TAMORA in Australia?
Yeah, okay. I thought everyone knew where TAMORA was, Mark, but for the ill-informed out there, TAMORA is approximately 4.5 hours west of Sydney. It's in the central southern New South Wales, probably about an hour north of Wagga. Most people would know where Wagga, or would have a vague idea where Wagga Wagga is. And then we've got Griffith to our west. The main economic drivers around here are agriculture, and we've also got an office in a town called West Wyalong, which is 50 minutes north of TAMORA.
Gundagai.
We did have one in Gundagai, but it shut down earlier this year. But we're still servicing that town. So even though we're based in TAMORA and West Wyalong, we actually service quite a big area throughout the whole southwest slopes. And the two main drivers out here are agriculture and gold mining.
Oh, really? Gold mining?
There's a big gold mine in West Wyalong.
Okay. Now, us city folk, whenever I think, for some reason, whenever I think country agent or country, there's some sort of warmness to my heart, and I don't know why, and I'm sure a lot of our viewers would agree. Like, what is it with us city guys looking at where you live and how you live and that attraction? Like, do you find that the city folk come in with their bags of cash, and what's the attraction?
Oh, look, I think, you know, at the back of our mind and our culture, I mean, Australia, even though it's ironic, isn't it, that we're the most urbanised country in the world, most people live in cities, but when they think about Australia, people think about the outback, they think about, you know, Henry Lawson versus Banjo Patterson. There's a lot of romanticism that goes with all that. So I think, you know, I always find when I travel down to Sydney that, you know, everyone's very empathetic. They want to hear about your stories in the bush. And I think, you know, yeah, absolutely. And that, you know, I get that feeling. So I often think, you know, when people are successful in the city, the first thing they want to do is come out and buy a farm, actually. So, you know, we do get a few people doing that, which is always good to see.
Were you always farm life or in the country, you could say, Angus?
Yeah, Michael, I was. I've lived in a little town near Barmedman is where I live. I was born and bred, third generation on a farm. And I went away to boarding school, came back and worked on that farm for 20 years with the family. And then I moved into the real estate industry after that. I've still got my farm, which I work every day and live on with my darling wife. But my main business now is real estate.
And you are officially, apparently, the best-looking real estate couple in rural Australia. Is this true?
I'm not even sure we'd be the best-looking couple in TAMORA, but in real estate. But no, maybe my wife probably would be up there. But unfortunately, I bring the team down a little bit.
Yeah, no, I met you at a barbecue about. I remember 10 years ago, we had a fundraising barbecue and bit of a glamour couple, ladies and gentlemen. I just have to say. So, okay, the attraction to rural, something that I've noticed, and correct me if I'm wrong, we agents in Sydney have been affected. Purchasers, sellers have been affected. It seems that your part of the woods I won't use the word immune, but social distancing, COVID-19, last 8 weeks. How have you found it out there?
It hasn't. It's been nowhere near as bad out here, Mark. So we've got 12 staff in the 2 offices, so we haven't stood anyone down. Everyone's been coming to work every day. Obviously, we've got a property management section of our business. They've been really busy. Residential, for a few weeks, the phones did stop ringing. But we were very active on social media, trying to emulate guys like yourself. Although not to the same degree, but that's where we felt that there was an opportunity, because everyone was at home and on their phones and on their computers and looking for content. So we did a lot of that. And on the farm side of things, we didn't see any drop off at all. So if I can,
unbelievable.
When you think about it, in the good old days when you had kings and queens going back to England and Europe. If you went off to war and you performed well and you came back and you were still alive, what did the king and queen give you as a reward? They gave you, gold and land, right? So when things get tough, it reverts back to that, real assets, land and gold. And it's been interesting, but during the last 8 weeks, everything in the farming or agriculture sector has actually been booming. So we've had our currency devalue, which meant that we had commodity prices rise. We saw a big rush on flour and pasta. What are they made out of? Wheat. So the price of wheat went up. We've seen interest rates come down. We've seen good rains across Eastern Australia. We've seen stock prices at record levels. So in actual fact, there's never been a better time to be farming. So that industry, in fact, has strangely enough benefited from this pandemic.
I can't tell you how good that makes me feel. And I'm not as an Australian, like, it just seems like the last 10 years, 15 years, rural Australia and farmers have just been absolutely pounded. And it's great to see you guys with your thumbs up in the air saying something like that.
Yeah, look, even though we have been pounded by, pretty dry conditions in the last 3 years, the fundamentals for agriculture have been great, maybe for the last 10 or 20 years. And so I've got a lot of clients out there that have been, basically going slowly about their business. They're not the guys you'll see on the news complaining about the drought every week or whatever. They're guys that are going around and building their businesses, building their family businesses, generating a lot of wealth. And it's, to be honest, it's a very, very successful business to be, or industry to be in. A lot of innovative entrepreneurs, but they're not the guys you see on the news, in the dust storms. They don't get interviewed,
Does a typical rural transaction include, because obviously you're buying the land, but there's generally a big attachment to what you can do on the land, and does that vary from farm to farm? And how do you sort of just market that? Because a lot of people they've got cows or etc. on the land as well. So are you doing a lot of the time? Is it more that business side of it just comes with the land, or is there a lot of added benefit from different blocks to blocks? You could say.
Great question.
Yeah, that is a good question, Michael. And I was only telling someone about this the other day, because I'm marketing a place in Cootamundra at the moment, and I had a city guy asking me really technical questions about farming. And I sort of used the analogy that is, if he was buying a commercial property, for instance, in DY, and it had a pizza shop in there, he wouldn't be asking the agent technical questions about how to make a pizza. You're selling the building. So I'm only selling the land, I'm selling the farm. It's up to the person who's purchasing it as to what he wants to do to it. The previous manager or the owner of the land might have been absolutely hopeless, and you don't want to take any, notice of what he was doing with his business, because it's all up to the new owner. So it's a new plate. So anyone who buys a farm can come on it. It may have been a cattle enterprise. They might change it to sheep. They might grow more grain. There's so many different things you can do in agriculture. So every farm is different, and every farm owner has a different view on how a farm should be run.
And that's probably a very good point, just to draw that line in the sand, because once you sort of start trying to give more information, it's a bit of a slippery slope, and then they ask more questions where you just from the get-go just like, I'm selling the land, this is the size of the land, what you do with it's up to you, because sometimes you try and be a little bit more helpful and it's just you're sort of going down the wrong path, and you come off the direction of, I'm here to sell the land, not talk business ideas with you or the history of it.
Yeah, exactly. And you guys would know too in your commercial stuff, and sometimes you talk to vendors and they've got a fairly rosy picture on, how much money they've been making off the property, and you've got to be careful when you take that into account, because, obviously the vendor wants the highest price possible. So, for instance, we always quote rainfall records, and for some reason, every vendor I've ever had, his farm gets more rainfall than the district average. So, you've got to be careful with stuff like that. So, obviously with that, we go back to the official data, go to the closest weather station and quote that figure.
Okay, now you just glossed over something very quickly there. What is a rainfall figure?
Okay, so that's your annual average rainfall. So in rural Australia, everyone knows their annual average rainfall because you live and die by the sword, which is rainfall. So, for instance, here in Barmedman, the average annual rainfall over the last 120 years has been 480 millimetres a year. And just to put that in context, Sydney gets around 1,000. It's quite wet. But most of the farms that we sell fall within the sort of 650 millimetre to 450 millimetre a year rainfall. So,
I love this conversation.
So do you need a different qualification to sell rural? So it sounds like you guys have your residential homes and rural. Do you do commercial buildings as well? And what type of qualifications do all your agents just have the same everything, or are they separate within? Very similar like residential v commercial here. Do you have to have additional qualifications to do what you're doing?
Yeah, you do. So to sell over 100 acres, you need a stock and station agency licence, and that enables you to sell farms. It also enables you to sell livestock, so sheep and cattle. We don't actually sell livestock in our business because we're 100% real estate and property, but most agents in the country do both, with an emphasis on stock, actually. So I think, traditionally out in the bush, real estate has been sort of not given the importance that it probably deserves.
What's a cow worth?
Well, look, a few months ago, before the drought broke, a cow wasn't worth very much, but they're up around $2,000 or $3,000 now, like a cow and a calf. And that's risen from say $800 this time 12 months ago. Sheep are the same. They were worth $100 to $150 for a ewe, which is a girl sheep or a lady sheep. And now they're trading at sort of $300. So they've doubled.
And on that, do you get like good looking sheep and ugly sheep? Do you pay more for one or the other?
Well, what happens is when a mob of sheep, what happens is the rams go in for like a 1 or 2 month period every year. So that's called joining. So the rams come in and there might be, say, 500 ewes and you put in 15 rams. So the rams have a pretty good life, actually. So they go round, they do their job. And then when the rams go out, you come in and you test every single ewe to see if it's got a lamb. And quite often, you actually have an ultrasound. You ultrasound the lambs in the yard. Or the ewes, I should say. So then you know how many ewes are pregnant and how many aren't. So the ones that aren't, they get redrafted out and often go out with the rams again. And I often joke that they're the ugly ones. And if you've got a ewe that never gets, and she might have other issues, you generally sell them, unfortunately.
Got it. They're not good at it.
What's sort of a typical transaction for a farm? Is that like a year on the market? Are they selling in 30 days? What's typical?
Our campaigns generally run for about 6 weeks. We're using expression of interest more than anything, which we find very effective. So I would say at the moment, for the last 4 or 5 years, it's been, probably 8 weeks on the market. Occasionally you get a farm that, is a bit more difficult to shift because the vendor wants a little bit too much money, or, it might be dry in that area and the neighbours are all suffering, financially. So, so we've got a block one farm that's been on the market for 2 years that we're struggling to get it, across the line. But then we've got another one at Cootamundra we're selling at the moment, which, we'll have sold by the end of June. It went on the market middle of April. So we're finding, and you guys would be the same, we're finding it, people are finding it hard to get answers from the banks at the moment. They seem to be, struggling with the virus. I think with a lot of their back office stuff overseas has been shut down. So that's our biggest issue at the moment, people getting answers from the banks.
Okay, just a quick question on you're probably going to go for the jugular bank question, are you, Michael? Before you do that, I know, but before you do that, can I just frame this up and help correct me? I'm sorry to ask the question, but it's a little bit selfish, but I'm thinking about the buyers in Sydney, right? And I know we're talking industry and business and farming and stuff like that, but I would imagine with my customers in the northern beaches and across Sydney and a little bit eastern suburbs, they would come. I guess there'd be two styles. They'd want the Gucci farm, and then they'd want the tax deduction farm that earns a little bit of an income, but again, a farm they can travel to and spend time with their kids. What are you paying for a farm these days for a little, for those two types of farms?
Yeah, good question, Mark, because they're two completely different investments. And that's what I always say when an investor or someone in Sydney rings me. I say, well, what do you want? Do you want the Gucci style? I like that. I like that, actually. I might start using it, the Gucci style. Or do you just want something that you're going to make some money out of? And they're two distinctive investments. So basically, the Gucci style, 500 acres to 1,000 acres, maybe 200 acres, they start at Bowral and come all the way out to, say, Cootamundra. That's about as far, 4 hours out of Sydney is about as far as anyone's prepared to drive on the weekend.
4 hours, okay.
Yep. Must have a beautiful homestead. Livestock, they want vistas, so they want rolling hills, and if they can have a creek or a little river, that's perfect. So they're actually very expensive. They'll never make any money out of them. They will get capital gain, but they'll never be able to operate them because they're too small, because in agriculture, it's all about scale. So we've actually got a very big business. We've been sort of growing it for the last 10 years where we manage properties for investors. And what happens is the investors just come out, they say, we want to buy we want to be exposed to agriculture. We don't want to live there. We don't care about it. We just want exposure to agriculture. Wow. The only way to do that is if you want to run it yourself, you need $10 million to start, to get you in the starting blocks. If you want to run it yourself or put a manager on, because you need scale. But if you just want to have exposure to agriculture, what we suggest is that you come out and you buy a farm. It would, you could get one for as little as $1 million. And then you lease it out. So basically, it's just like owning a commercial building, and then you put a tenant on it, and then you just get your, it's 6 monthly in advance. So you get paid twice a year, 6 monthly in advance. You can probably get now a 4 to 4.5% return. When we started 10 years ago, we were up between 5 and 6, but obviously yields have come down because prices have gone up in everything. And we've got people in Switzerland that own farms out here, have never seen them and never will see them. But they trust us to buy a property for them and then manage it. So we find the tenant and then we just manage it. It's like property management. So we've got properties in Western Australia, Queensland, New South Wales, probably $200 million under management. Yeah, it's a growing industry. Or a growing.
So it's 1 to 10 million for the working farm, depending on how hard you want to work it. What's the Gucci farm cost?
Well, in the Southern Highlands, they start off. You're not going to get anything decent. 200 acres maybe for $6 million. There's nothing cheap there.
And so a lot of this value would be tied up in proximity to the city and this type of structure on that land. Yeah. Yeah,
correct. And I mean, that's why the Southern Highlands are so popular. It's close to Sydney. It also does rain a lot up there. So, and it's beautiful basalt soil. So it's quite productive. But from an economic point of view, you'd never get an economic return off a farm there.
And I think, how do people finance it? Are these generally all cash buyers? And because if I'm just coming from Sydney and you just want a lifestyle change, you may go up there twice a year. you're spending $1 million now, like, because you go to your broker here, they're like, what's the rental return, comparables? How would you do it there? Are you just pre-framing to purchasers if they're calling from Sydney saying it's all cash or don't bother? Or how do you demonstrate what the income could be? What sort of, yeah.
Well, there's plenty of farm consultants in the bush, so I often point them in the direction of a farm consultant if they have no idea and if they are looking to run a farm themselves. The economic return from the leasing model is really simple because it's easy to go out and find a tenant and say, well, what would you be prepared to pay for this? So even before the transaction's done, we've got the asking price, what the purchaser is going to have to pay, and we know what rent he can get. So that's really simple. Running a farm is a lot more complicated. Most of the small Gooshy style farms, they are cash buyers. So they're just guys who have had very successful businesses in Sydney or Melbourne or wherever, Zurich, and they come out and they pay cash. So it's not so important whether it makes a 1% return or a 10% return. That's not why they're purchasing it.
And a lot of so when you get a call from someone from Sydney or Melbourne, is that when you take that call, is that like they're my core business, or here's another person just dancing with a lifestyle that they never do and they're a bit of a time waster because a lot of your deals are done within the area? People just upsizing, downsizing, changing farms, or is most of the business from externally?
I'd say 80% of the business is local. Okay. Neighbours or people on our database, some of the big corporate farmers that operate all through Australia, we know it's only a small industry, so we know them all. If a farm comes up that we think might be of interest to them, we give them a call. But it's normally local interest, and maybe, I don't know, I've never done the research, but 40 or 50% of the time, maybe it's a neighbour. Maybe not quite as high as that, but quite often.
What's the most annoying call you'll get from Sydney?
Yeah.
I can't. I don't
Typical.
think I can talk.
Typical, yeah.
Oh, no, I can't really say on a live show. I don't think. But you often get people who have absolutely no idea. So we've done I can't. I don't think I
reckon it's my mother-in-law.
Yeah, your mother-in-law's great. I've seen her on all of Lisa's feeds, and I quite like her actually. She's a real character, but she'd have plenty of cash too, so she should give me a call. She would love a Gooshy style farm.
She's been talking about farms for 20 years. Oh, farm! She's that perfect dreamer of a farm, and there's a lot of people that aspire over it. That's for sure.
On behalf of all the agents watching, I think everyone's probably thinking it. Commission figures. Are they, Sydney's on average, say 2%? Where does the country sit there? Lower, much higher? I know some commercial properties can sit when it can be like 4%. Like where does your average percentage, and does it vary?
It definitely varies. So on the bigger jobs, we'll cut our commission, and on the smaller jobs, it can be higher than 2%. So I would say, basically we would be averaging around 2% for sure.
Okay.
And then depending on the size of the job, obviously we can vary and talk to everyone.
How can we help you?
Well, look, as I said, Mark, self-isolation for the last 8 weeks. We've been doing it for 25 years, or I have. It's just part of the norm out here. So if you're worried about this pandemic, it's time to get out to TAMORA because, it's business as usual. But, look, really, I think that as an asset class, rural has always been frowned upon because people do look in the media, look at the media all the time, and they see the stories about droughts, floods. There's an old story, I think, in the media, if it bleeds, people read. So they're always looking for people, with a story. And if you go out and interview someone who's just had a good year on the farm and he's turning over and he's increasing his wealth by 7% every year, that's not a story. You want someone who's struggling and, he's got dust storm and his paddocks are blowing away and his cattle are dying. Now, that's a story. So that's what people see.
Yeah, isn't that true?
Yeah.
So something that we may have, I think I've missed is probably the biggest reason to get into a farm, making money. So what sort of capital growth would someone expect typically if they were going to buy an asset like a farm? And does it change in different areas? So is it doubling in 10 years or 20 years, or capital growth?
Yeah,
Or is there no capital growth?
it's actually doubling every 10 years. It's exactly the same as Sydney real estate.
Wow.
So it's been quite impressive. And so,
Wow.
yeah, it goes up. And, you know, the interesting thing is that what happens is that most farmers, they live for farming. So if they make a profit, they either buy their neighbour out or they buy an extra tractor or try and become more efficient. They actually capitalise their profits. So all their profits end up going into the land prices. So that's why the land prices keep going up, because that's what farmers do. They want to continually expand. So they have a business. They have two sons. They've got to buy a property for each son. So it creates a lot of competitive tension for more country, because they're not making any more of it. So you just see a gradual tick up of land prices the whole time. And it's been an incredibly good investment for anyone who's been in it the last probably 50 years, but, there's, certainly the last 10 or 20. It's very safe.
And when a farmer retires and gets old and he's 75 and 85, does he end up in the city or does he end up on the farm?
No, they normally retire to the local town. So, I mean, if they're around TAMORA, they'd move in there. If they're in the West Wyalong, they'll move there. So, they tend to stick where their family is. Obviously, if they've had daughters and they've all moved to Sydney, they might retire to Sydney. But generally speaking, they'd be somewhere local.
What a great interview. Thank you, buddy. That's incredible. And Michael, you got any more questions?
There's so many things go through your mind, doesn't it? Do you also handle business sales separately to property, or just, as you did say, strictly property, but there's no dancing with? Is that a big part of it as well in rural, selling the business separately?
No, you don't sell the business. You just sell the farm, because everyone's, it's just you don't sell a business. It's not worth anything. So you're just selling the land. We do sell businesses in town, but it's not a big part of our operation, to be honest.
Yep.
Okay. And do you have any questions for us? We've been machine gunning questions at you. This is meant to be two-way street.
No, I don't have any questions, because I watch you guys every day, so I know exactly what you're doing.
The big mouth real estate agents we've been blabbering the whole year.
Oh, look, no, it's great, because I mean, and the great thing about you guys is that you're quite happy to share what you're doing with the rest of the industry. I think it's great, and not everything that you guys do would work in TAMORA, but there are parts that I think, wow, that's a great idea. So I often say to the staff, you've got to get on and see what Lisa's doing, or Mark or Michael or whatever, and they've come up with a really good idea. Why don't you give this a try? So I think it's great, to be honest. You're doing a good job, a fantastic job.
Thank you. I will say, what's the starting point? Say if we're with clients today who are more lifestyle, maybe want to have somewhere to buy where they travel, maybe once every 2 months too, because I think that 4 hours is key. Anyone I speak to has holiday homes, they're sort of saying 4 hours and under is that limit.
Yep.
Anything further, it's just too far to do it on a Friday night and get away from the city. So what would you recommend, or what can we pre-frame and then send to potentially you for clients who are looking for that sort of lifestyle change? Nothing to do with running the business. They just want a cabin where they can go with their family and escape the city life, maybe have a couple horses or nothing. Like, is that something that you can do as well? And how do you pre-frame that? How can we pre-frame that to a client as well?
Yeah, no, that's a good question, Michael. I mean, basically, a lifestyle block, I guess 2 to 3 hours from Sydney, you'd be looking anywhere from sort of, you could probably get a small bare block for $500,000, but something with a dwelling on it, you'd be looking more 700 to 800, and with a substantial dwelling, maybe a couple of $1 million would get you get you at the table. So that's the sort of money you'd be looking at. And by all means, I mean, I think there's a strong interest in the city for wanting to have a place in the country where they can go out, Don't need 1,000 acres. About 100 acres, you get on the push bikes, and you get on the motorbikes, you can get on the horses, whatever, and get your kids exposed to country living, because it's a great place in the world. It's a great place to be.
And what would be those suburbs if you had to pick 2 or 3 suburbs or areas for someone to look at for that lifestyle? And you talk about 100 acres. So we just need 1 acre. We've got blocks of 300 square meters here. So
yeah, no, that's true actually.
So,
look, I mean, the most popular areas have always been sort of around Oberon, Bathurst. Orange is a wonderful part of the world, particularly with the food industry and what they're doing with wine there. So I mean, that's a growth area. It's only sort of 3 hours from Sydney. So as I say, Orange, back to Blaney, Goulburn, Yass even, down to Canberra. That's your sort of circle.
And for someone for Sydney, you just call, and just so people have that sort of dialogue, because there's, I think, like obviously you've got dialogue that you use there. So that would just be a lifestyle block you referred to it as.
Correct.
Is that what a lifestyle block?
It's a lifestyle block. That's what we call them. Yep.
Okay. Cool.
You're a legend, mate. That's it. I've I got to say, since COVID, I reckon a lot of people are feeling affectionate towards farms. Like I even had a discussion last night with my 14-year-old, my youngest, and I was just saying, like, I'd love to get her and I out on a dirt bike on a farm for a weekend. I think a lot of people are thinking about that, Angus.
Yeah, I totally agree. And it's interesting, isn't it? And I mean, it's not just in the country, but the last 8 weeks, a lot of people have said, you know what, this has been the best time of my life. I've had the kids home. We've been relaxed. We haven't been doing much. And I know out here, people have been going out on barbecues and cutting firewood and riding motorbikes and just having a great time with their kids. And it's a wonderful part of the world, to be honest. And particularly this time of year, it's just lucky that it coincided with March, April, May, we've pretty much got the best climate in the world at this time of year. 25 degrees every day, cool nights. It's been beautiful.
Big time. And it's sort of been a rug up sort of time of the year, and it's coincided perfectly. You're right.
Yep, absolutely.
Well, that's a take, ladies and gentlemen.
That's a take. Thank you very much, Angus. That's been really good.
Thanks, Michael.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thanks,
a lot. Mark.
Take care, man. You're a legend.
Okay. Cheers.
Love to come and see you soon. Okay, mate.
You'll have to do that. See you, buddy. Bye.
Yeah, see you, man. Bye.
Okay.